Hello YouTube, welcome back to Nutkin Farm. I am taking you along block 6 of my orchard, which was the unruly block I mentioned a couple of videos ago. Grass overgrown completely and needed a fair bit of work to get it under control, but as you can see in front of you, it is now under control. And it took slashing down the middle of the row, then mowing between the trees, and I actually mowed down the rows as well to try and get those grass clippings as small as I could. Although it kind of looks like the entire place has been mulched with grass clippings. There was that much of it. And why do that now? Well, the reward is under the trees. There's quite a few nuts on the ground ready to be picked up, and with any luck, some of them will be this year's nuts and they'll be good. This block's been in rehab for a while since I bought the farm, and it's pleasing to see its recovery continuing without the trees growing overly large all at once. This video is one that's probably going to lose me some friends. I suspect if my agronomist sees it, he'll kill me. Other guests of the macadamia show, like Bruce Chester and Maddie Kelby, well, they might just, if I'm lucky, they might just wound me. But the topic of this video is how to be a Pitt Street macadamia farmer. And it's sort of tongue-in-cheek, but for those who are genuinely interested in owning a macadamia farm but not managing it themselves, here's a little brief guide for you, including some pointers on what not to do when going about it. And I'm not going to go into which farm to buy or not to buy. There are guides to that. I've done a couple myself on the real estate market, and if you go over to a channel called the Australian Macadamia channel, there are some decent tips on which kind of farms you should buy and avoid. Not everywhere planted with macadamia trees should have been planted with them. Once they're in place, they all look very natural, like they should be there, but in reality there's some farms and some parts of farms that shouldn't be planted, and you don't want to fall into those pitfalls. This video starts where you've got the farm already, and what do? You don't want to be managing it, you don't want to be mowing it and slashing it like I've just been doing. You want it to be completely managed by someone else, either as an investment for you or to keep it as a placeholder till you're sort of ready to make a seed change or tree change and come do it yourself. What should you do then? Well, there's a few rules that apply to business generally that also apply to macadamia farming, and one of those is that knowledge is power. And I mean, I see this in business, I see this in my other walk of life, which is as a barrister. I've won many cases not by being the better barrister, but by having better knowledge of a case, and I've lost cases on the same basis as well. Having knowledge is what you need to arm yourself against being taken for a ride. And I'm not suggesting that this industry is full of cowboys or people who will take advantage of people, who don't know very much about farming. But there certainly is evidence that managed farms from contractors are in general run down and in a poor condition. You hear anecdotes of it all the time. I've seen managed farms that have basically looked like they've just had no restorative maintenance on them at all. And my agronomist himself has come across farms that just don't look like they've been looked after at all, that they've just been basically raped, for want of a better word, for whatever crop they can get at the minimum possible outlay. And what that will leave you with is a farm that may require years to rehabilitate if you're going to take it over yourself, or if you then sell it, the results and the tree condition will be such that an incoming agronomist might advise a purchaser to stay well away. And therefore you under either of those scenarios, you lose the value of your asset, and that's not good. So what knowledge do you need, assuming that you do want to be an absentee farmer, you don't really want to, do a degree on, raising macadamias? where do you go and look for the right sort of information that puts you on a more equal footing with the people you're dealing with? There are a few places. One is you should become a member of the Australian Macadamia Society and use their resources. There's also a new macadamia resource, a guide that's just been published by the AMS that will cost members about $120 and non-members about $200 to have a copy. It's the latest on all aspects of macadamia farming, reasonably time efficient as a read, but very comprehensive in terms of what makes macadamia farms thrive, and what to look out for in terms of symptoms of bad management or a declining farm, and then what to do about it and how much it costs. So highly recommended that you get either that, or if you're an inquisitive mind like me, you get online on their online resources section and you read up individual articles. Only downside of the individual articles is you don't get the whole picture and you may not know what you're missing. So that's one of the hardest parts of learning this trade is not knowing what you don't know, if that makes any sense. So with that knowledge, you can then start asking proposed contractors questions about how they would manage your farm. Right? As I mentioned before, the anecdotes show that farms under management are often thrashed. They're fed the cheapest food, which is usually granular chemicals, although not at the moment. They're sprayed with sometimes the quickest and dirtiest sprays, which have a long-lasting effect, which means the contractor can go and manage their other farms without a trouble, but they can cause some environmental damage on the subject farm, and you don't want that, you know. So the older residual sprays like diazinon are very easy to sort of set and forget on a contracted orchard, but they're an organophosphate that kills beneficials, including bees, and kills basically anything else that is on the tree that might otherwise protect you from those very insects. Contractors are a funny bunch. You know, there are some companies who will outsource the entire process from you. So they'll do the mowing, they'll do the feeding, they'll do the harvesting, they'll collect the nuts for you, they'll give you your earnings from them, and they'll either take a share of your earnings or they'll do it for a fixed fee or an hourly rate or whatever it is. Now, each of those models kind of depends on what size farm you have, what crop it's potentially going to produce for you. And you'd understand that, you know, a tiny farm, you can't expect a contractor to do it for a share of the crop. They'll go out the door backwards. But a large farm, you know, and by large I mean, say, you know, 30 planted hectares or something like that, you know, there's obviously some potential to do a percentage of the crop. Now, the advantages and disadvantages of all this is if you do a fixed price, the contractor's financial interest will be to manage your farm as quickly and cheaply for them as they can possibly do. So to do the minimum possible to produce a result. Because it takes them less time, effectively their hourly rate is increased because they're spending less time on getting you the result for the money. An hourly rate, well, the disadvantage of that is if they over-service you, the cost can blow out and become, you know, uncompetitive with the size of the crop that you're making, particularly if the contractor is a little bit loose with calculating hours, shall we say. Then there's the percentage of crop. Now, its potential disadvantage is that, you know, the aim of the contractor will be obviously to maximise the crop and therefore maximise the contractor's own percentage of it. That sounds great, but there are short-term ways to a large crop that over time can lead to a much smaller crop. And to give you an example, if you keep on just farming the existing trees without doing any pruning or management, initially the crop will be higher, because when you don't prune, there's obviously more fruiting wood, that sort of thing. But over time, when the rows close over, unlike these ones where there's plenty of space between the rows, but when the rows close over, the tree starts becoming less productive. It starts needing more food in order to produce a crop. Eventually then, of course, you might find the contractor no longer interested. But in the meantime, your orchard has gone from a productive one that suited the contractor at the time to an unproductive one. And when it comes to where the buck stops, well, contractor or no contractor, that, sir, will be you. So there's some different models to consider. And, you know, I guess at the end of the day, you can, in advance of setting contractual terms, if you have the knowledge, look at things that you want to specify as minimum standards. Do you want the trees fed organically? Do you want them sprayed without organophosphates? Do you want mowing to be done a certain number of times? Do you want harvesting to be done a minimum number of times per year? Now, if all those issues sound a little bit like you're not going to be a Pitt Street farmer, you're actually going to be making active decisions in the running of the business, that's not a mistake. You really can't sit back entirely, because the track record of the people who do sit back entirely is really pretty poor. In an earlier episode of the Macadamia show, Bruce Chester described how the Kerry Packers organisation gave all their top-level executives macadamia farms as a superannuation benefit, and for the most part, neither Kerry or the executives never visited those farms. They'd get annual reports showing nice bright green trees with bright green leaves, and they'd show the saplings growing nice and strongly. Underneath it all, though, was a form of management that, while it looked good, there were some compromises made on the long-term health of the farm, and the farms were not performing as well as they otherwise might. So to make some active decisions in it is absolutely a good idea. So, you know, as a Pitt Street farmer, please treat part of your job as knowing what's going on and knowing how your farm is being managed, not just the fact that it is being managed. So we have those sorts of issues to consider. I suppose the next thing is there are different ways of managing farms towards certain goals. And your goals, obviously, and the contractor's goals or the manager's goals might not always be the same. So soil health, for example, is something that definitely contributes to the crop. It's been proven time and time again. Healthy soil, healthy trees, good crop. So if you, for example, have a manager who, instead of mowing all the time, repeatedly herbicides the place, killing off all the undergrowth, you're going to get a bad result. You might end up with erosion, so not only unhealthy soil, but a lot less of it. And, you know, you don't get the kind of long-term result that you want. Now, if you're only holding the farm for a short period of time, you want to get the crop stats up so that you can sell it again at a profit, I can understand short-term planning. But the standard plan that an agronomist might give you is something more like a 5-year plan. So if you've got an existing orchard, part of the plan might be pruning or thinning out rows. Yes, that means less production. And, you know, for a manager, they don't want to be blamed for low production, of course. But if it's agreed in a plan and you understand in advance that means, you know, short-term production loss for long-term production gain, then everyone's on the same page. No one has to be defensive about it. You know where you're going and better still, how you're going to get there. The other thing to avoid with a manager is that there are some sort of turnkey management companies, and it's not hard to Google them up and find them in the Northern Rivers. I'm not going to offer you any opinions on individual companies and whether they're good or bad. Just bear in mind that None of them, as far as I know, are completely in-house. But there's a referral system that these managers use. So they'll get their mate to do the mowing. They'll get another mate to do the harvesting, and they might well do some of the processing themselves, or get another mate again to do the actual processing of your nuts and taking a lot of the selection away from you. Now, to the Pitt Street farmer, that's taking away a lot of the hassle. And I get that. You don't want the hassle. But the mates referral network can get you better service and more available service, but it doesn't always get you the best price. The other thing to do with a manager is that they'll often tell you, I'm an agronomist, or we have an in-house agronomist who manages your orchard and makes sure they get the best health out of the trees. And they give you an annual report, and that might include some, input from an agronomist. Now, a contractor with an internal agronomist is a little bit like governments holding internal inquiries. They're not likely to find anything wrong with what they're doing. It's the same crowd. There's a little bit of a conflict of interest in that the agronomist's primary interest is not you, but the company the agronomist reports to. And so, many people get agronomists to assist them in selecting a farm in the first place, but it's quite important to have an independent agronomist from the one who may well be managing the farm. It's not a matter of having two agronomists. You don't need to. But in terms of assessing the farm and seeing what the performance is, well, it is actually okay to have reference to another agronomist who can go into the farm, and not every year, it can be once every 2 or 3 years, look at the state of the place, look at what's been done, and actually offer some independent commentary on whether that is any good. And you don't always have to go with the agronomist. I mean, there have been times where I've accepted the recommendations of some contractors that I have here on Nutkin Farm over what the agronomist did. Sometimes I might have been right, sometimes not. I pruned block 5 a couple of years ago. I'm not impressed with the result. And my agronomist, if you watch episode 1 of the Macadamia show, my agronomist wasn't impressed with it either. In hindsight, would have I done it? Look, I might still have. We've got to get those trees down one way or the other. But, at least we had eyes open and I had an independent opinion on. This spring, I got hay raked. I got a hay rake under some of my old blocks to bring some debris back under the tree roots. That's not something my agronomist really knew about, but once he saw the result, he approved. So having an extra mind on it, and pulling in some information from the rest of the industry is really quite beneficial, and in my opinion pays for itself. Have an independent agronomist if you've got the farm externally managed, and don't be just reassured by people saying, oh, we've got our own agronomist, you needn't worry. Don't you worry about that. So there's that. And then there's also another idea, and this is sort of one of my examples of do as I say, not what I do. Be a member of a benchmarking program. Now, the AMS has a benchmarking program where you can put your farm in it. You have to agree to contribute all your farm statistics in terms of, crop, kernel quality, what you're doing, how often you're doing it. That data has to be contributed probably by your farm manager if you're a Pitt Street farmer. But then in return for that, you get benchmarking against all competing farms of the area, your size, bigger size, whatever else. So, your manager, for example, might say to you, geez, Bill, you had a great year this year. You cropped 40 tonnes. That's nice. If you were expecting 30 tonnes and you got 40, that's wonderful. But was it good management, or was it just a good year for macadamias? There are some seasonal conditions over time where nearly everyone has had a good year, even the people who neglect their farms. And, I've looked back at stats of farms, many farms, particularly when I was buying them. You look at the historical stats. There were some years that were horrible. And then there's some years where everyone did great. So you need to know when your manager tells you you've had a good year, well, how is that relative to other farms. And that really becomes a bit of a reality check. You know, you're less likely to be spun a story about how good the management is if you know that everyone's having a good year. Similarly, if you're having a bad year and you feel like sacking your manager, it might not be your manager's fault at all, and it might not be in any way mismanaging things. You can then compare yourself with the rest of the industry, which of course includes, you know, managed farms, owner-occupied farms, or in my case, pretend farmers like me, who do some of the farming, call all the shots, as in I actively manage it, but don't actively do all the work that's involved because I have another day job. So, back to the original question. Pitt Street macadamia farming. If you've watched this far and you think, well, geez, you know, what he's really saying is don't be a Pitt Street macadamia farmer at all, you're kind of right. If you go full Pitt Street, you're likely to end up with a poor farm. And then, of course, that leaves aside the point that, you know, this is too beautiful to miss out on. You know, I heard the story of all these packer executives who must have been high-stress individuals back at Channel 9 and Consolidated Press, never coming to visit these beautiful macadamia farms they owned in prime agricultural land in Eureka. They never came up here and enjoyed them themselves. And, you know, you can have all kinds of investments. You'll never go for a holiday in a share certificate. You know, but, you know, if you've got this, sure, it might make you money. It might justify itself as an investment in its own right. But why wouldn't you come up here, enjoy it, know what's going on? Because knowledge isn't just power, it's also pleasure. And you can really derive a lot of pleasure by just walking around your farm, looking at the trees, seeing what's going on, and enjoying the nuts on the ground as the fruits of your efforts. So there's that particular video. The next video I do will be on the other angle, and that is, what if you want to leave your current job and become a full-time macadamia farmer? What do you need then, and what do you need to succeed? So stay tuned for that one. That's going to be fun. I will let you go now. Thank you for watching, as always. Goodbye for now.